The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the towering pine trees as Emma Carter tightened the straps of her weathered backpack. The crisp mountain air filled her lungs, carrying the earthy scent of damp moss and wildflowers. To most people, the forest looked intimidating, an endless maze of ancient trees, rocky cliffs, and hidden valleys. To Emma, it was a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the modern world faded into birdsong and rustling leaves. At 29, Emma had built a modest career as a wildlife photographer. Her photographs had appeared in nature magazines and online publications, but success had come with sacrifices. Months of traveling alone, endless deadlines, and fierce competition had slowly drained her passion. Worse still, a painful breakup 6 months earlier had left her questioning almost everything about her life. Her friends suggested vacations, therapy, or meeting new people. Emma chose something different. She came to the Black Ridge National Forest because of a rumor. Local birdwatchers spoke of a rare white hawk that appeared only during the rainy season. No one had managed to capture a clear photograph of it in years. Some believed it was simply an unusually colored eagle. Others claimed it was a spirit of the mountains, appearing only to those who had lost their way, not just physically, but emotionally. Emma laughed at the legend. "I'm here for the photograph," she had told the elderly ranger at the park entrance. The ranger had smiled politely but studied the dark clouds gathering over the distant peaks. "Storms moving in faster than expected," he warned. "You should stay close to the marked trails." Emma nodded confidently. She had explored forests across 3 continents. She carried a GPS device, paper maps, a compass, emergency supplies, and enough experience to navigate difficult terrain. Getting lost wasn't something she worried about. With her camera hanging around her neck, she stepped onto the narrow trail winding through the towering trees. The forest welcomed her with peaceful silence. Sunlight danced across patches of green ferns while squirrels darted between branches overhead. Every few minutes she stopped to photograph deer tracks, colorful mushrooms, and tiny songbirds hidden among the leaves. Hours passed without her noticing. Then she heard it. A distant cry echoed through the valley. Emma froze. She raised her camera instinctively, scanning the treetops until she spotted a magnificent white hawk gliding effortlessly above the canopy. Its bright feathers almost shimmered against the gray sky. "There you are," she whispered. Without thinking, she left the main trail. The bird soared deeper into the wilderness, disappearing behind enormous cedar trees before reappearing several hundred yards away. Emma followed carefully, snapping dozens of photographs whenever the hawk circled overhead. Each image looked better than the last. Each step carried her farther from the safety of the marked path. Eventually, the bird vanished completely. Emma lowered her camera and looked around. The forest had changed. The familiar trail was gone. Instead, she stood surrounded by towering trees so dense that sunlight barely reached the forest floor. Moss-covered boulders blocked every direction, while tangled vines wrapped around fallen logs like sleeping snakes. She frowned. "No problem," she muttered. She reached for her GPS. The screen flickered. Then went black. She pressed the power button several times. Nothing. The battery can't be dead. A low rumble interrupted her thoughts. Thunder. Emma looked toward the mountains. The dark cloud she had ignored all morning now stretched across the sky like an enormous blanket. Within seconds, the wind strengthened, bending tree branches in every direction. The temperature dropped sharply. Leaves swirled around her boots as another clap of thunder shook the forest. Then came the rain. Not a gentle drizzle. A wall of water crashed through the trees with astonishing force. Within moments Emma was soaked. She hurried beneath a massive pine tree, hoping the thick branches would provide shelter, but the rain poured through the needles as though they weren't there. Her jacket became heavy with water, and droplets blurred the lens of her expensive camera. She quickly packed the equipment away, protecting it as best she could. "Okay, stay calm," she whispered, forcing herself to breathe steadily. She unfolded her waterproof map, but the powerful wind nearly ripped it from her hands. Visibility dropped to only a few yards. The forest transformed into an unfamiliar world of shadows and noise. Rain hammered the leaves overhead while thunder echoed from every direction. Small streams formed across the ground, growing wider by the minute. Emma tried retracing her steps, but every tree looked identical. Every direction felt wrong. An hour passed. Then another. The rain never slowed. Her boots sank into thick mud, and several times she slipped climbing wet rocks. One narrow creek she had crossed earlier had become a raging torrent impossible to step over. For the first time in years, fear crept into her mind. She wasn't just off course. She was truly lost. As evening approached, darkness settled beneath the forest canopy far earlier than expected. Emma knew spending the night exposed to the storm could be dangerous. Her clothes clung to her skin, her backpack felt twice as heavy, and the cold was beginning to sap her strength. She stopped beside a fallen tree, trying to think. Then something caught her eye. Far in the distance, barely visible through the sheets of rain, a thin ribbon of gray smoke rose above the treetops. Emma stared at it in disbelief. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant shelter. And shelter meant someone else was somewhere deep inside the endless forest. Gathering every ounce of hope she had left, Emma adjusted her backpack and began walking toward the smoke, unaware that this single decision would change the course of her life forever. Emma pushed through the rain-soaked undergrowth, her legs aching with every step. The thin ribbon of smoke she had spotted moments earlier had become her only guide. It drifted lazily above the trees, sometimes disappearing behind the storm before reappearing again. She prayed it wasn't her imagination. The forest grew quieter as she walked. Even the birds had vanished, leaving only the relentless drumming of rain and the occasional crack of thunder rolling across the mountains. After nearly 20 minutes, she noticed something unusual. A narrow footpath. It was almost invisible beneath the wet leaves, but unlike the animal trails she'd crossed earlier, this one showed signs of careful use. Small branches had been trimmed away, and the muddy ground carried faint footprints. Someone lived here. Hope gave Emma the strength to keep moving. The path wound through towering cedars until the trees suddenly opened into a small clearing. Nestled against a rocky hillside stood a simple wooden cabin with a sloping roof covered in moss. Smoke drifted steadily from a stone chimney, disappearing into the gray sky. The cabin looked as though it belonged to another century. There were no power lines, no vehicles, and no signs of modern life. Firewood was stacked neatly beside the wall, while a small vegetable garden rested behind a low fence. Nearby, rainwater flowed into handmade barrels carved from old tree trunks. Emma could hardly believe her eyes. She hurried toward the porch and raised her trembling hand to knock. Before her knuckles touched the weathered wood, the cabin door slowly opened. A tall man stood in the doorway. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with long black hair tied neatly behind his head. His dark eyes studied Emma without surprise, as though he'd known she was coming. His face was calm, unreadable, yet carried a quiet strength shaped by years of living close to nature. He wore a simple buckskin shirt beneath a thick woven blanket draped across one shoulder. Around his neck hung a small carved pendant made of polished wood. Neither of them spoke. Rain poured between them. Emma suddenly realized how strange she must look, soaked to the bone, covered in mud, clutching an expensive camera bag with shaking hands. She began, her voice barely audible. I'm lost. The man remained silent for another moment. His gaze shifted toward the dark sky before returning to her. Without a word, he stepped aside. It was an invitation. Emma hesitated only briefly before entering. Warmth surrounded her instantly. A fire crackled inside a large stone fireplace, filling the cabin with the comforting scent of cedar wood. Handmade shelves lined the walls, holding clay bowls, dried herbs, woven baskets, and neatly folded blankets. Everything inside was simple, clean, and carefully crafted. The cabin felt peaceful. The man quietly closed the door behind her, shutting out the storm. For the first time all day, Emma could no longer hear the wind. He motioned toward the fireplace. "You'll get sick if you stay in those clothes," he said at last. His voice was deep and calm. It was the first sentence she had heard in hours. Emma nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Without another word, he disappeared into a small side room and returned carrying a dry wool blanket and a bundle of clean clothing. "They're oversized," he said. "But they'll keep you warm." Emma accepted them with a grateful smile. "I really appreciate this." He simply nodded. While she changed behind a hanging curtain, the stranger placed a black iron kettle over the fire. Soon the rich aroma of herbal tea filled the cabin. When Emma emerged, wrapped in a warm blanket, she already felt like a different person. The man handed her a steaming wooden cup. She took a cautious sip. The tea tasted of mint, pine needles, and something slightly sweet she couldn't identify. "It's good," she said. "My grandmother's recipe," he replied quietly. For several minutes, they sat across from one another in silence, listening to the rain pounding against the roof. Finally, Emma spoke. "My name is Emma." The man looked into the fire before answering. "Kai." She waited for him to say more. He didn't. "So, you live here alone?" "Yes." "For how long?" "A long time." His short answers weren't rude. They simply reflected someone who had grown accustomed to silence. Emma glanced around the cabin. "You built all of this?" Kai nodded. "Mostly." She couldn't hide her curiosity. "I've hiked forests all over the country. I've never seen a place like this. It isn't on any map." She smiled faintly. "I noticed." For the first time, the corner of Kai's mouth lifted into the slightest hint of a smile. Outside, lightning flashed through the cabin windows, followed almost instantly by deafening thunder. Kai stood and opened the front door just enough to examine the weather. Water rushed down the hillside in muddy streams. The narrow path Emma had followed had completely disappeared beneath the flooding rain. He closed the door again. "You can't leave tonight." Emma looked toward the window. The storm showed no sign of ending. "What if someone is looking for me?" "They probably are." "And if they don't find me?" Kai met her worried gaze with calm certainty. "They won't find you in this weather." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had entered the forest expecting to spend one peaceful afternoon taking photographs. Instead, she was stranded in an isolated cabin with a mysterious stranger hidden deep in the mountains. Yet strangely, she didn't feel afraid. The warmth of the fire, the rhythm of the rain on the roof, and Kai's quiet presence gave the little cabin a sense of safety she hadn't felt in months. Neither of them knew it yet, but the storm outside had only just begun, and so had the journey that would change both of their lives forever. Emma awoke to the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the cabin roof. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The warmth of the wool blanket and the soft glow of the dying fire made her feel as though she had awakened from a strange dream. Then she remembered, the forest, the storm, and the quiet man named Kai who had offered her shelter without asking for anything in return. She sat up slowly. The cabin was peaceful. Kai was already awake, kneeling beside the fireplace, adding fresh cedar logs to the flames. The scent of burning wood mixed with the aroma of coffee brewing in a black iron pot. Morning light struggled to break through the storm clouds, casting a gentle gray glow through the small windows. "You sleep lightly," Kai said without turning around. Emma smiled. "I've spent too many nights camping in the wild." Kai nodded, as if that explained everything. He handed her a steaming mug. "It's not the coffee you're probably used to." Emma took a sip. The drink was rich but carried hints of roasted acorns and mountain herbs. It was unfamiliar, yet comforting. "I like it," she admitted. Kai simply smiled before looking out the window. The rain was heavier than the day before. Water rushed through the clearing in narrow streams, and the small footpath leading to the cabin had completely disappeared beneath the flood. "It doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon," Emma said. "No," Kai replied. "The mountains decide when people leave." His words sounded less like a joke and more like a belief. With nowhere to go, the day unfolded slowly. Emma helped prepare breakfast while Kai repaired a woven fishing basket that had begun to unravel. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt natural, as though the forest itself encouraged quiet moments over unnecessary conversation. After breakfast, Emma wandered around the cabin, studying the handmade furniture and carved wooden decorations. One shelf caught her attention. Several old photographs rested inside simple wooden frames. She picked one up carefully. It showed a younger Kai standing beside an elderly Native American couple. All three were smiling. "They're your parents?" she asked softly. Kai looked up from his work. "My grandparents." Emma noticed the sadness that briefly crossed his face. "They raised me. What happened to them?" Kai was silent for a long moment. "They passed away." "I'm sorry." He nodded quietly. "My grandfather taught me that every tree has a story. Every river remembers the footsteps of those who crossed it. He believed the land speaks, if people are willing to listen." Emma gently returned the photograph to the shelf. "Is that why you live here?" Kai stared into the fire. "Partly." He set the basket aside and folded his hands. "I grew up between two worlds. My family respected the old Apache traditions, but the towns around us kept growing. More roads. More buildings. More people. The forest became smaller every year." He paused before continuing. "I tried living in the city once. And it never felt like home." Emma understood that feeling more than she expected. She walked toward the window, watching rain slide down the glass. "I know what you mean." Kai looked at her curiously. "You do?" Emma let out a quiet sigh. "I grew up believing success meant working harder than everyone else." She laughed softly. "I became a photographer because I loved nature. Somewhere along the way, I stopped loving it." Kai listened without interrupting. "I spent years chasing awards, followers, deadlines." She continued. "Every photograph became about pleasing someone else." She hesitated before speaking again. "And then my fiancé left." Kai remained silent. He said I loved my camera more than I loved him. The words still hurt. "I thought throwing myself into work would help me forget." "Did it?" Emma shook her head. "No." Rain continued falling outside, almost as if the sky itself mourned with her. "I came here because I needed to remember why I started taking pictures." Kai looked toward the forest. "To see beauty?" Emma smiled faintly. "No." She looked at her camera resting beside the fireplace. "To feel it." For the first time since they had met, Kai's expression softened completely. "My grandmother used to say something similar." "What did she say?" "People think they see the world with their eyes." He tapped his chest gently. "But they truly see it here." Emma placed her hand over her heart. The words lingered in the quiet cabin. Hours slipped by unnoticed as they continued talking. They shared stories about childhood adventures, favorite places in the mountains, embarrassing mistakes, and moments that had changed their lives forever. Emma laughed more that afternoon than she had in months. Kai laughed too. His laughter surprised even him. As evening approached, the storm finally eased into a gentle drizzle. Emma stepped onto the porch. Mist drifted between the towering trees, and the forest glowed with fresh shades of green. Tiny droplets clung to every leaf, reflecting the fading light like thousands of tiny crystals. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Kai joined her. The forest always smiles after the rain. Emma lifted her camera. Instead of photographing the landscape, she turned toward Kai. He raised an eyebrow. What? She smiled. The light. He looked confused. It finally found you. The shutter clicked. For the first time in years, Emma didn't take a photograph for a magazine, a contest, or social media. She took it because it captured a genuine moment, one she never wanted to forget. As the soft rain continued to fall around them, Nita realized that the walls they had built around their hearts were beginning to crumble. One quiet conversation at a time. The storm lingered for 3 more days. Although the rain was no longer violent, it fell steadily enough to keep the rivers swollen and the mountain trails washed away. Each morning Kai walked to the edge of the valley to inspect the water levels. Each afternoon he returned with the same quiet answer. Not yet. Emma had stopped asking when they would leave. Instead, she found herself settling into the peaceful rhythm of Kai's life. The days began before sunrise. Together they gathered fresh water from a spring hidden beneath a rocky ledge, where the water emerged so clear that every pebble at the bottom seemed to sparkle. Kai taught her to thank the land before taking anything from it, a tradition his grandparents had practiced every day. Nothing in nature belongs to us, he explained one morning as they filled wooden buckets. We're only borrowing what we need. Emma had never thought about water that way. Back in the city, she turned a faucet without a second thought. Here, every drop carried meaning. After breakfast, Kai led her deeper into the forest. He moved through the trees with quiet confidence, his footsteps so light that even the fallen leaves barely stirred. Emma struggled to keep up, often slipping on damp rocks or catching her jacket on low branches. Kai smiled. The forest isn't testing your strength, he said. It's testing your patience. She laughed. I'm failing. No. He pointed toward the ground. You're learning. Emma followed his gaze. Tiny deer tracks crossed the muddy trail. She would have walked right past them. Kai knelt beside the prince. This doe passed here before sunrise. Emma frowned. How can you tell? The edges are still sharp. If they were older, the rain would have softened them. He pointed to a broken fern nearby. And she wasn't alone. Emma looked closer. Smaller hoofprints appeared beside the larger ones. A fawn. Kai nodded. They're heading toward the western meadow. Emma stared at the tracks in amazement. To her, they had looked like random marks in the mud. To Kai, they told an entire story. Over the following days, he taught her more than survival. He showed her which berries were safe to eat and which could make a person dangerously ill. He explained how different birds warned each other when predators approached. He identified medicinal plants hidden among ordinary weeds and demonstrated how to weave sturdy rope from strips of bark. Every lesson carried the same message. Observe before acting. Respect before taking. Listen before speaking. Emma realized those principles applied to people just as much as they did to nature. One afternoon, they reached a meadow glowing with wildflowers. Butterflies drifted lazily through the warm air while sunlight finally broke through the clouds for the first time in nearly a week. Emma instinctively reached for her camera. She spent the next hour photographing everything: the delicate wings of a monarch butterfly, a fox watching from the edge of the trees, and sunlight sparkling on rain-soaked petals. When she finished, she turned to show Kai the images. He admired each one carefully. They're beautiful, he said. Emma smiled. I've taken better photographs. Kai looked at her. Maybe. She frowned. But I've never seen you smile while taking them until today. His words caught her by surprise. She looked down at the camera in her hands. He was right. For years, photography had felt like work. Today, it had simply felt like joy. That evening they sat beside a small campfire outside the cabin. The sky had finally cleared, revealing thousands of stars stretching across the mountains. Emma had never seen so many. They're incredible. Kai lay back on the grass. My grandfather used to tell me every star carries the memory of someone who chose kindness over fear. Emma smiled. Did you believe him? When I was a child. And now? He looked at the sky for a long moment. I don't know. Emma lay beside him. I think he wanted you to believe kindness never disappears. Kai turned toward her. Maybe. Silence settled comfortably between them. Not awkward. Not empty. Comfortable. The kind of silence shared only between people who no longer felt the need to fill every moment with words. After a while Emma spoke softly. Can I ask you something? You already are. She laughed. Why did you help me? Kai didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a small pine cone and rolled it between his fingers. My grandmother once found a lost traveler during a snowstorm. Emma listened quietly. He stayed with my family for 2 weeks. What happened? He survived. Emma smiled. I mean after that. Kai looked into the fire. He returned home. And your grandmother? She said helping someone doesn't mean asking them to stay. Emma felt something stir inside her. She realized Kai had never once tried to convince her to remain in the forest. He never asked personal questions she didn't want to answer. He never expected anything in return. His kindness was freely given. That made it more powerful than anything she had experienced in years. As the fire burned lower, Emma found herself studying his face illuminated by the orange glow. There was strength there. Patience. Loneliness. She wondered how many evenings he had spent watching the stars with no one beside him. Kai noticed her looking. What? Emma hesitated. You seem peaceful. A faint smile crossed his face. I've had to make peace with being alone. The words lingered between them. Emma suddenly realized she had been trying to do the opposite. She had spent years running from loneliness. Kai had learned to live with it. Perhaps that was why he seemed so whole. The forest had not only sheltered them from the storm. Without either of them noticing, it had begun healing wounds they had carried for years. And somewhere deep within their quiet conversations and shared sunsets, something new had started to grow, something neither of them was yet brave enough to name. On the 8th morning, Emma woke to an unfamiliar sound. Silence. No rain drummed against the roof. No wind rattled the cabin walls. The forest, which had echoed with storms for more than a week, was finally still. She stepped outside and stopped in her tracks. The valley shimmered beneath the golden light of the rising sun. Every leaf sparkled with tiny drops of water, and wisps of mist floated lazily between the towering pines. The stream still rushed with snowmelt and rainwater, but their fury had softened. The storm had finally passed. Kai emerged from the cabin carrying 2 mugs of hot coffee. He looked toward the mountains, studying the landscape with the practiced eyes of someone who understood nature's moods. It's safe enough to cross the lower river today, he said quietly. Emma accepted the mug but didn't answer. For days, she had imagined hearing those words. She had pictured the relief of returning home, calling her worried family, and sleeping in her own bed. Now that the moment had arrived, relief wasn't what she felt. Instead, a strange heaviness settled in her chest. Kai noticed. You don't look happy. Emma forced a small smile. I thought I'd be. They drank their coffee in silence, watching sunlight slowly fill the valley. Finally, Kai stood. We should leave before the afternoon. The walk through the forest felt different. The same towering trees, winding trails, and singing birds that had once frightened Emma now felt strangely familiar. She recognized landmarks that had been invisible to her before, a twisted cedar growing from a boulder, a fallen log covered in bright green moss, and a narrow stream where deer often stopped to drink. Without realizing it, the forest had become part of her. As they walked, Kai paused beside a cluster of wildflowers growing between two rocks. He carefully picked one small blue blossom. "This is called Mountain Forget-Me-Not," he said. Emma smiled. "I know the name." He handed it to her. "My grandmother believed you should never leave a place that changed your life without taking something living from it." Emma accepted the delicate flower with surprising emotion. "I'll keep it." "You won't need to." She looked puzzled. "It grows from memory," Kai said with a faint smile. Emma laughed. "That's the most mysterious thing you've said all week." It sounded wiser in my head. They continued walking, both smiling. By midday, they reached a rocky overlook that faced the southern valley. Kai stopped suddenly. "Listen." At first, Emma heard only birdsong. Then came another sound. A faint chopping noise. She looked toward the sky. Far in the distance, a helicopter appeared above the treetops. It circled once. Then again. Emma's heart raced. "They're searching." Kai nodded. They never stopped. The helicopter moved closer, flying slowly over the valley. Emma instinctively stepped into the open clearing and waved both arms above her head. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the aircraft turned sharply toward them. "They see us!" Emma shouted. The helicopter hovered overhead before moving toward a nearby open ridge suitable for landing. Rescue workers quickly made their way down the slope. The lead ranger hurried toward Emma. "Miss Carter." She recognized him immediately. It was the elderly ranger from the park entrance. Relief flooded his face. "Thank goodness. We've been searching for 8 days." "I'm okay," Emma assured him. He looked her over carefully. "We were afraid the floodwaters." His voice trailed off. Then his attention shifted toward Kai. The ranger removed his hat respectfully. "I should have guessed." Kai simply inclined his head. "You found her." "I did." The ranger smiled knowingly. "I owe you more thanks than I can say." Kai answered with quiet humility. "The forest brought her here." The rescue team prepared to escort Emma back to the helicopter. One of the medics handed her a warm jacket while another collected her backpack. Everything was happening so quickly. Almost too quickly. Emma turned toward Kai. For the first time since meeting him, she didn't know what to say. "Thank you" felt far too small. She stepped closer. "I don't know how to repay you." Kai shook his head. "You already have." "How?" "You reminded me that opening your door to someone doesn't always mean losing your peace." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She reached into her backpack and removed one photograph. It was the portrait she had taken of Kai standing on the porch after the rain, the one where soft morning light illuminated his quiet smile. She handed it to him. "I want you to have this." Kai studied the photograph for a long moment. "I've never owned a picture of myself." "Then it's yours." He accepted it carefully, as though it were something precious. The helicopter's engine roared louder. The rescue team signaled that it was time to leave. Emma looked at Kai one last time. "You could visit the city someday." He smiled gently. "And you could visit the forest." Neither made a promise. Neither asked the other to stay. Some connections were too honest to be bound by expectations. Emma climbed aboard the helicopter. As it lifted into the sky, she looked down through the window. The cabin became smaller and smaller until it disappeared beneath the endless green canopy. Kai remained standing in the clearing, one hand resting against the photograph she had given him. Emma realized something then. She had entered the forest searching for a rare bird. Instead, she had found something far more extraordinary. She had found the version of herself she thought she'd lost. And as the mountains faded into the distance, she silently wondered whether this goodbye was truly the end, or only the beginning of a story neither of them had expected. 6 months had passed since Emma left the mountains. Life had returned to its familiar rhythm, but somehow, it no longer fit. Her photographs from the forest became the centerpiece of a national wildlife exhibition. Critics praised the collection for its honesty, calling it the most heartfelt work of her career. Magazines requested interviews, galleries offered contracts, and several publishers wanted to feature her story. Whenever they asked what had inspired the photographs, Emma simply smiled. "The forest taught me how to see again." She never mentioned Kai. Some stories were too personal to be turned into headlines. Although the city surrounded her with noise, crowded streets, and endless deadlines, her thoughts often drifted back to the quiet cabin hidden among the pines. She remembered the warmth of the fire, the scent of cedar after the rain, and the evening spent watching the stars in comfortable silence. One evening, while organizing her photographs, she found the small blue flower Kai had given her. The mountain forget-me-not had dried between the pages of her notebook, its petals delicate but still intact. She smiled. "It grows from memory." His words echoed in her mind. At that moment, Emma realized something. She didn't miss the forest. She missed the person who had made it feel like home. The decision came without hesitation. 2 days later, she packed her camera, a few clothes, and a small wooden frame containing one of her favorite photographs, a picture of the cabin glowing warmly beneath the rain. Then she began the journey back. The elderly park ranger recognized her the moment she arrived. "I had a feeling you'd return someday," he said with a knowing smile. Emma laughed. "Was it that obvious?" He nodded. "People who truly find themselves in these mountains usually come back." The trail looked completely different under the clear autumn sky. Leaves painted the forest in shades of gold, amber, and crimson. Birds filled the air with cheerful songs, and cool breezes carried the scent of pine through the valley. This time, Emma didn't need a map. She remembered every turn. Every stream. Every ancient cedar. The forest no longer felt like a maze. It felt like an old friend welcoming her home. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, the familiar clearing came into view. The cabin stood exactly as she remembered. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Emma paused at the edge of the trees. Her heart pounded faster than it had on the day she became lost. Before she could take another step, the cabin door opened. Kai stepped onto the porch. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Neither spoke. Then a slow smile spread across Kai's face, the same quiet smile she had captured in her photograph months earlier. "I wondered how long it would take," he said. Emma laughed softly. "You knew I'd come back." Kai shrugged. "I hoped." She walked toward him. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." He glanced around the forest. "I told you." He smiled gently. "This is my home." Emma looked into his eyes. "So, is there room for one more?" Kai didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped aside, leaving the cabin door open, just as he had on the stormy day they first met. It was all the invitation she needed. Emma walked inside. Very little had changed. The stone fireplace still glowed warmly. The handmade shelves remained filled with herbs and carved bowls. On one wall, carefully framed, hung the photograph she had given Kai. Seeing it there made her smile. "You kept it." "I look at it every morning." Before Emma could reply, a familiar sound echoed across the valley. Soft thunder. She turned toward the window. Dark clouds drifted over the mountains, and within minutes, gentle raindrops began tapping against the roof. Kai joined her at the doorway. "The first autumn rain," he said. Emma stretched out her hand, letting the cool drops fall across her fingers. Months ago, she had feared the rain. Now, it felt like an old friend. Without saying a word, Kai stepped off the porch and into the gentle shower. Emma followed. Together they walked through the clearing as rain shimmered in the fading light. The forest glistened around them, every leaf sparkling like polished emeralds. Neither hurried back inside. Neither sought shelter. Emma looked up at the gray sky and laughed, a free, joyful laugh that echoed through the valley. Kai looked at her and laughed as well. In that quiet moment, surrounded by towering trees and the soothing rhythm of falling rain, they both understood something that needed no explanation. The storm that had once seemed like a disaster had been the beginning of everything. Had the skies remained clear, Emma would never have lost her way. She would never have found the hidden cabin. She would never have met the man who taught her that peace isn't a place you discover, it is something you build, one choice at a time, with someone who understands your silence as deeply as your words. The rain continued to fall, gentle and unhurried. This time, neither of them wished for sunshine. Neither of them wanted the rain to stop. Because sometimes, the most beautiful journeys begin when life washes away the road you thought you were meant to follow.